Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. History was made in the United States of America last night when Hillary Clinton became the first woman to become a candidate of a major political party for the presidential race. The U.S. presidential elections, scheduled for November 8, has now become a battle between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, the Republican candidate. Hillary Clinton, who has served as a senator, Secretary of State, apart from being the First Lady when her husband Bill Clinton was the president between 1994 and 2002, has a tough race ahead. Her nomination over her closest Democratic rival, Bernie Sanders, has left a vast army of Sanders supporters disappointed. She also carries the burden of being called the establishment person when the mood seems to be anti-establishment. However, with firm backing from President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle, and of course her husband, former President Clinton, she has formidable support. The Trump challenge, however, is not to be taken lightly. We will discuss today the challenges before Hillary Clinton on her march towards the White House. To discuss this, I have with me Rakesh Sood, former ambassador, Professor K.P. Vijayalakshmi of the Center for American and Canadian and Latin American Studies at the JNU, Manu Bhagwan, Professor at Hunter College in New York, Pramit Pal Chaudhary, consulting editor, Hindustan Times, and on the phone line from New York is Lewis Goldberg, an attorney who is closely following the presidential race. Welcome to all of you. Rakesh, you must have heard the speech of Hillary Clinton, yes, and the entire the jamboree, the Democratic National Convention. At the end of it, what was your impression?
Well, I think Hillary Clinton came across as a very, very credible candidate. She has been through a tough primary because normally in the primary you have the candidate who tries to go to the extreme and after getting the nomination come to the center. In her case, she was in the center because it was Bernie Sanders who was in the extreme. So this is going to create an interesting sort of dynamic for her, because how does she get the Sanders supporters on her side before trying to also poach into the Republican camp, where there are some people in the Republican camp who are uneasy with Trump's candidacy.
Okay, Manu, Rakesh Sood says that she came out as a credible candidate. You think this is how the Americans would be looking at?
Absolutely. First of all, with respect to Sanders supporters, the data that we have suggests that about 90%, maybe over 90% of Sanders supporters have already declared their support for Hillary Clinton. So she has strong support from the progressive side. A number of prominent Republicans and independents have also declared their support for her. The best example of that was Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, former Republican, independent, and Democrat, former Republican and Democrat, now independent, who made a forceful case for her, appealing specifically to Republicans and independents. So I think she definitely has credibility. She's come out of the convention very strong. She has widespread support, I think, from various sectors of the establishment, and she's beginning to grow her popular base as well.
Okay, Lewis, you there?
Yes.
Okay, what are the challenges? Taking the two panelists here feel that she has emerged as a credible candidate, but still, do you think that she still faces the challenges which were there in the last few months, that she faced a rampaging Trump making all kinds of allegations and charges against her? How is she going to tackle all of them?
Well, Trump is an unpredictable candidate. He runs an asymmetrical campaign, so the traditional responses don't really have the effect you would think they would have. The things that have happened lately in the news, especially with the triangulation between WikiLeaks and Russia and his backing off on the commitment to NATO, would normally end the campaign largely, but not with Trump. And I think that has to do with the distinct polarization of the American electorate. One thing you do have to keep in mind is the unique nature of the American electoral system. It's not a popular vote. It's an electoral college where each state is given a certain amount of electors to present for election. As a result, certain states, called swing states, have a distinct influence upon the election. These states, such as Virginia, Florida, but most importantly, Pennsylvania and Ohio, are states where Trump has some advantage, because that's the states where there has been a loss of industrial manufacturing, and that's where he gains a lot of his support, so-called Rust Belt. And to be quite frank, this election may well come down to one or two states, and within those states, how much turnout there is. Can Hillary Clinton, can she generate the type of enthusiasm that President Obama generated, and get that type of turnout? And if she does, I think that the numbers clearly favor her. But if she doesn't, she may have some difficulty, because as of right now, she is trending behind Mr. Trump in both Ohio and Pennsylvania. And we will have to see what happens after the convention, because traditionally there is a convention bump in popularity.
Okay. Okay, stay on. I'll come back to you. Vijayalakshmi, the challenges before Hillary at this point of time.
I think the biggest challenge for her is to create an aura of credibility of her own self. You know, the personality also is a very big factor. I would say her policy credentials, her experience, her temperament, and her ability to be able to be part of a big team and get people to work with her, get things done. All of that is already well known, and that's the message that the Democratic Party has unitedly put out. Steady, strong, competent, experienced, temperamentally suited, and a person who cares and is compassionate, etc. They've also done a good job, I think, of humanizing her. President Obama started it. Michelle Obama gave a very uplifting speech, but Chelsea, I think, had done an enormous job in making her a mother figure, you know. All of that matters. But her problem has remained one of trust in her. And that, I think, is going to be her challenge, with all the other challenges of process. You see, the American elections, what we understand from here, is not just politics and process, but it's also people. The second big challenge that she has is not just the people, you know, she has to win them over. The second one is also how to fight this deep polarization that we are seeing. See, normally by the time the general elections campaigning begins, the next 3 months, if you like, we would see mostly positions and nuances and things like that. But this time, what we are seeing is two very deeply divided, polarized collectives, which may or may not become the part of the universe of the candidate. And the third challenge is also when, again, it's coming back to people. One is process and how each state will do it, and the party polarization, and the disappearance of this belief that it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. A lot of people used to say both parties are very alike and all that. That's gone.
That's gone.
You know, that's completely gone. Now, the third challenge for her is also to think about the loss of votes of, firstly, not people turning out to vote either for her or for Trump. That may cancel each other out. We don't know. But also the third parties. For example, there are many people who are saying they will go to Libertarian Party, you know, rather than vote for Trump. There's a disaffection in the Republican Party, which even after the convention bump, you had to listen to that part of it. But there are also in Democratic Party, there is, I know, the professor said that there is now an open declaratory sentiment that they would be supporting her. But if there is another third party, like Green Party or anything, which Pramit and I were discussing a couple of minutes ago, it's, I think, a challenge. It is a challenge because history has shown these type of intra-party battles from Barry Goldwater, McGovern. You know, these are bitter feuds. In 1968, there was a major fight between Robert Kennedy and, you know, Humphrey and the peace candidate Eugene McCarthy in the Democratic Party. So the Chicago police beating up the students, you know, all that. So one does know that parties have battles. You know, these battles are there. And at the same time, the results have not been, without impact on the party.
Okay, Pramit, you know, when during the primaries, when Bernie Sanders was, you know, on the rise, and there were a lot of sentiments in his favor, it was being said that, you know, there is some kind of a hard left and a hard right in terms of Donald Trump. Now, you see Hillary trying to, you know, take that centrist path, and will she be able to be successful in that? Is that her challenge?
Well, no, I think she she definitely is in the center. What was noticeable in her speech was the fact, and throughout the Democratic convention, was in fact the invocation to the Republican Party. You had Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, you had Obama describe Trump as not really Republican, and it was a deliberate attempt to try to attract a large chunk of the mainstream Republican vote, which does not see Trump, whose economics are actually quite left-wing, and who does not represent the foreign policy consensus that has traditionally dominated within the Republican Party. And of course is an outsider himself in terms of the fact that he's been registered as a Democrat most of his life. So so very clearly an attempt to position at the center, and I think one of her accomplishments was that in the platform negotiations with Bernie Sanders, she didn't actually move very far left. There are some things, for example, tuition-free college education for state institutions for poor families, but nothing major in terms of pushing her position so far left that Trump would be in a position to move into the center himself or hold on to Republican and independent votes within America. So on that point, I think she's done a good job. She is now very clearly the center candidate, plus a bit of the left. Her problem will be, as you've mentioned in your opening statements, that she's seen as an establishment candidate.
Right.
This is now the defining problem within the American electorate, that a large number, mainly white working class voters, who are still by far the largest chunk of the electorate, who are saying, we don't actually care what Trump says or does. We just want somebody who is not close to Wall Street, not close to Washington, who has never served in a government, who has no experience. I was recently
today's speech, last night's speech of Hillary Clinton, very clearly, she addresses this issue. She says that she will not allow Wall Street to take over the Main Street. She's there. She's trying to.
Well, that's where you get into the issue, as just mentioned, about her integrity. The problem is that even among Democrats, the vast bulk of them don't believe that she tells the truth. So as a consequence, it's very hard for her to make this case and have voters prove it. So in many ways, what struck me in the speech that she makes at the convention is that she doesn't even address the integrity issue. She says that no, what is important is that we face economic foreign policy problems. But look at my experience and my competence that I have to handle these problems versus Mr. Trump, who's got zero.
Okay, that's interesting. Manu, would you like to respond to that? Her credibility issue.
Right. Well, it's definitely an issue. It's something that many people have raised questions about. But I think it's important to put it in the context of the broader challenges that many women in public service face. I think that there's broad misogyny at work that's driving so many of those kinds of questions, although she certainly has obviously done things that have played a role in undermining some of her credibility. But reviews of politicians' statements in terms of who tells the truth and who lies the most has her, in fact, as one of the most honest politicians of the modern period right now. So I think there are facts and there's an image problem. She has to focus on why people have a hard time believing her, and part of that is this.
Why do you think? Where does the problem lie as far as?
Well, I think she's a private person. I think she acknowledges that. I think it was in her speech yesterday evening. I think that she largely tries to focus on the job that she's doing and less so trying to engage publicly, as opposed to, for example, her gregarious husband. So she has this problem, first of all. That gives the impression to many people that she maybe is not always as forthcoming as she could be or should be. So that's one thing. And the other, as I said earlier, I think still stems from the fact that she is breaking down one of the last remaining barriers and also one of the fiercest, which is for a woman to emerge at the top of a ticket to lead the country in the United States, to lead the military. And this is something that many people, I think, resist and have resisted, obviously, forever until this moment. So that's her primary challenge.
Oh, that's very, yeah.
Well, I
No,
just
it's a question of misogyny.
Yes, and I
And-
just wanted to come in because I'm so glad, this has been said. Because, she herself mentions this in her speech, that more than public, I have been a servant of the work that I do. And the reason is that many women who are especially successful or in relentless, brutal scrutiny of any public office have to be very careful. And because they are careful, very often you'll hear the statement cold and calculating. What is cold and calculating? Just because you're not going to be able to hug a person, maybe. If you do that, there are repercussions for all of it.
I hear these kind of comments from American women also, not just men.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But the fact of the matter is, for a woman, I'm not saying who makes these comments. I'm saying the notion that a woman can behave like a man exactly in the same way, to be able to compare the two in the same parameters, sometimes is actually way off the mark. And I think misogyny is a problem that you need to address. Just as when we saw President Obama get elected, we did not believe that race relations are now going to be forever hunky-dory.
It was not. Obviously, it is
It
not.
was
Yes.
not.
Here's Mr. Sood.
No, she obviously will have to fight the election from what she sees are her strong points, which is policy. Now, in doing so, she also has to make a clear distinction that if she's seen completely as establishment, then it acts as a negative, because in a sense, that is the kind of campaign, or that is the kind
is the
of
mood, actually.
polarization
That's the
which
kind of mood
Trump
which is
will
there.
try and use. So while emphasizing her strength in terms of being strong on policy, being strong on experience, she will have to find a way of overcoming the negative vis-a-vis trust. And perhaps that is where the reference to being a mother and a grandmother and, all of that comes in. I think that's how she wants to be able to overcome that. Not in terms of directly addressing questions of trust, because then it becomes a debate and it's very difficult to win that kind of a debate. But I think at an emotional level of mother, grandmother, that kind of a thing, I think she hopes to be able to appeal in terms of being able to overcome that.
Okay, Lewis,
I think
the Sanders supporters who have been terribly disappointed. We have seen in the last few days in Philadelphia, where they were out there on the streets trying to be sympathetic to Sanders. How is that going to play out? You think that the Sanders supporters will be moving towards Hillary?
Before I answer that, I'd like to jump into the issue of gender.
Yes.
Hillary has been a groundbreaker in many ways in the United States politics. Many years ago, when she was criticized for standing behind Bill Clinton through his various affairs, she arrived on TV one day and said that she made the decision years ago not to stay home and bake cookies. And that was seen as a rebuke of traditional gender models in the United States.
Right.
And there's no question in my mind that she is being treated unfairly in many ways because of her gender. And I agree with the last speaker. You can't get on television and say, trust me, because that's what Donald Trump is saying. But every effort is being made, as I see it, to try to humanize her. And the interesting part of it all is that when you speak to and hear other senators who worked with her in the Senate, they all say that she's engaging and she's interesting and she gets things done when you get to know her. And I think that's the issue, is trying to humanize her. And I think that's also what has to happen with the Sanders supporters, because with them, a lot of those people, I don't know how much participation in the electoral process they played before. And it's a wide swath of people. You have a true anarchist on the left, and you have more moderates. I suspect that of the Sanders supporters who otherwise would have voted, she would get the vast majority of those votes. Because I cannot imagine a Sanders supporter who is going to voting for Trump.
Okay,
the
but
question is going to be, will they vote?
sorry to intervene, Lewis, but the problem seems to be, or at least what many people have been writing about, is that these Sanders supporters may not be any more interested in voting at all. So to get them to the polling booth is going to be a challenge?
Absolutely, and the question is, but the real question in my mind, and I'm not as qualified to speak to it as other experts, but how many of them would have voted anyway, and how much of a loss would it really be? I suspect that what you're seeing in the media, a lot of the great disaffection for Hillary among the Sanders supporters has been amplified by the media coverage, the 24-hour news cycle, and I tend to feel, and this is more of a feeling than an analysis, is that a large part of the Sanders supporters eventually, in the next 100 days, will be persuaded by President Obama and the secret weapon, Michelle Obama, to come out and to support
No
Hillary.
more.
I can tell you there'll be a number of people that never will, but I don't know that they would have voted necessarily anyway.
Okay, she's no more a secret weapon, Michelle. She's out there. She's been out there. Pramit, this is the Obama is on his way out. He is probably having the highest rating of an outgoing president, and here is a Democratic candidate who is having all kinds of. How does these two gel? What's happening in America?
Let's put it this way. Obama himself, in many ways, was an outside candidate. Remember, he was not, while he was a senator, he was one who had served for a very short time, very much seen also as being outside of the party norm.
Of the establishment.
And in fact, the person he overthrew was Hillary Clinton, who would have otherwise had a very easy run to the presidency. And when he declared his candidacy, a lot of people didn't take Obama very seriously. And in fact, he then went on to sweep the primaries. The point again was that thanks to the global financial crisis that hit, disaffection because of two wars, there was an unwillingness in the U.S. electorate even at that point to vote for somebody who came out of the Washington circle. This has now been magnified in this election even more, partly because of the fact that the economy is better now, but as far as jobs are concerned, America's still struggling. So I don't necessarily see Obama's, to be fair, has gone up and down in the approval rating. And just a few months ago, he was actually in very bad shape. Luckily, the economy has recovered, so he's now much better off. The point is, when I was in Washington just 4 or 5 days ago, I met members of Hillary's campaign team. And they said that what they were nervous about was what happened in Britain under the Brexit.
Right.
Where you had a situation that at the day of the polling, at the day of the election, of the Brexit vote, the polls indicated that Brexit would not happen.
Exactly.
They were leading in the polls. That Cameron was expecting that he would win because the polls indicated it. The two major parties in the country were supporting staying in the EU, and then they lost by 4 percentage points. And what became very clear later on, and Clinton's team has already been looking at those numbers and saying what was very clear was that you had a huge degree of working class disenchantment outside of the major metropolitan areas, and in some cases in the north, even in the metropolitan areas, which was not getting captured by the polls, by people who were either outside of the normal polling structure or who just simply lied when they were told what you were going to vote.
Right.
And their sense is that they may face a similar swing vote in which they're not capturing. And in particular, one of the areas, we were discussing the question of gender, they were very clear that the area that they were most worried about was that white working women were not coming out for Hillary. Hillary was barely ahead of Trump among women, and their view was that this was a sign, because they knew that they were going to lose the white men, but they wanted to they assumed that they were going to compensate to some degree because she was a woman on the other side of the gender. That wasn't happening.
Okay, that's interesting. Mano, anti-establishment mood is one of the major things. At the same time, xenophobia, racism, Are these the major issues which are going to decide these elections?
Yes, that's an excellent question. So, first of all, with respect to Barack Obama's approval ratings, they have been under 50% for some time, but have been spiking of late. And one of the explanations for that Obama himself has joked about several times has been that he's looking pretty good in comparison to the particularly the opposition candidate of the Republican Party of late. And so people are beginning to realize, or people are beginning to have a much more favorable impression of him and giving him credit for much of the grace that he's brought to the office. So that's one point. Now, at the same time, how then do you, you had asked, how do you explain that gap between his rising popularity and the increasing or the stagnant numbers that Clinton has faced, at least of late, outside of the impact of the Republican convention, which gave Trump a bump? And I think the explanation for that is exactly what you just said. It is in many ways a visceral reaction to Obama himself on the lines of race. Related to that, immigration policies which have driven senses of xenophobia within the country. So the popularity of Trump and some of the thing that is making it challenging for Hillary Clinton is a sense of resentment on racial lines and on xenophobic lines for some members of the American population who feel threatened by what Obama has represented over the last few years and wish to, quote unquote, get their country back. So I think those are the main things. In terms of an appeal, Hillary, the name I haven't heard yet, of a card she has played and will be playing more over the course of the remainder of the campaign, is Elizabeth Warren. In fact, Warren has come to represent the entire progressive wing. It's now called the Warren wing of the Democratic Party. And she's come out really strong in favor of Hillary Clinton and has become a very effective surrogate in terms of taking on Trump, Mr. Trump, in some of the things that he has said, and in terms of making a reason, an appeal based on reason and emotion, I think, to working class people throughout the United States.
Okay. Rakesh?
No, race is certainly an issue. And I think the fact that President Obama, when he was elected, and I completely agree with Pramit on that he was seen as outside the establishment, quite clearly. And at the same time, there was also a certain aloofness because he was not part of the backslapping, beer sharing, hot dog, that kind of a thing. So just as we were earlier talking about the fact that a woman has to be that much more careful and that kind of a thing, so I guess he also had to be that much more careful, as it were, and maintained, which came across as aloofness.
Okay.
And intellectual arrogance and whatever you want to call it.
Lewis, very quickly, is this election going to be about race?
About race?
Yes.
I think this election is going to be about the both real and perceived loss of power among white male voters, to be quite frank. I think that there's a polarization in this country that I've never seen before. And I think that it's a matter of Hillary Clinton trying to convince white male voters that they still have a stake in this country.
Okay.
Because there's from guns to abortion to many other social issues. They feel that they're losing their country.
Okay, Lewis, completely. Very quick last words.
Well, I think her challenge will be, and to some extent, the bump up that she would receive is the Obama coalition that he built. And I think she
needs to work on.
She's got it in many ways because Obama himself made that pitch.
Right.
And his legacy would be to give that coalition a head start in the convention, which he has done.
Okay, on that note, we'll end. But it's going to be a fascinating election next 3 months. We'll be watching it closely. Thanks to all my guests. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time on Monday. Meanwhile, have a great week.